get a copy of this?
Yes.
Is it VCR or what?
Either way, whatever you want.
Okay.
DVD or VHS.
You can have either or both.
Yep.
I'm already bargaining. Elder's gone like this.
We're rolling.
Okay, this is
Okay.
an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 4th of October, 2006, approximately 10:30 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Nathan Tropper, no middle name. Born New York City, New York, December 16th, 1926.
Okay, what was your educational background prior to entering service?
I went as far as, I did not complete high school. I was in high school when I left. Then got my GED after.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
At home in Brooklyn, New York,
How did you hear about it, and what was your reaction?
on the radio. I was 13 or 14
Mm-hmm.
at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my family, we were sitting in the living room, and as a family, there were 6 siblings, and my mother and father, and we were coming in and out of the house, out of the apartment. We lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, and there was an awful lot of excitement, and my father told us to listen to the radio. And we were listening, and being younger, we understood the significance of what was happening, but we didn't understand any of the politics that precluded it. And but we were very well impressed, and that's all I can say about that.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was enlisted. I enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
My father objected; he wouldn't sign the necessary papers to let me enlist in the Navy, and I wouldn't talk to him until he relented. And he decided to allow me to join, so he signed and let me go in.
Now, why did you decide to enlist?
I was a young boy, and I was 17, and everybody, it was a different atmosphere in the world at that time, at least where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was signing up, everybody was going. We had been attacked by Pearl Harbor, at Pearl Harbor. And it was just a thing to do, and I felt I wanted to do it. I had no compunctions about it. I was a very aggressive and active kid, and I felt I really wanted to do that.
And why did you select the Navy?
I was a good typist, for one thing, and I liked the Navy. I never really liked the idea of crawling in the mud at that time in my life. I remember that, and I thought the Navy would be a lot cleaner. That's about the only reason I can give you now, because I remember that.
Okay.
And so we joined the Navy, and I joined with a friend of mine at the time.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go for your basic?
Bainbridge, New York. We were living in Baltimore, but I did want to join with him, so I went up to New York, and we both joined and went into, we were taken up to Bainbridge for boot camp. And
Was that a very big base there?
quite a large base. From my perspective at that time, remember, I was only 17, and the world wasn't that big, but that was big. And the thing that really impressed
Now,
me...
was that Sampson?
Sampson. Did I say Bainbridge?
Yes,
Bainbridge,
yes,
sorry.
okay.
I meant Sampson, New York. I'll get mixed up.
That's okay.
Thank you for correcting me. The thing that impressed me about Sampson, other than the training, which was typical, I think, there were requirements that we attend religious services. I don't know if you were aware of that at that time.
No.
We were required to attend religious services on Sunday or Friday or Saturday if we were Jewish. And the head of the company would come and inquire of us of what the service was about, to make sure that we went. This was after the services. And those of us that didn't attend, boy, there was punishment. They had to go around the grinder, they called it. It was a field track, carrying their whole outfit one whole night. I sure didn't want to do that. So I attended the services. And the guys used to razz us because, I mean, fellas in the company, most of them were Christian, not Jewish. A lot of Jewish kids, though. And they kidded us about enjoying all of our services and our holidays, and theirs too. And I said, well, that was not my fault. It just happened that way. You know, we'd enjoy Christmas along with them, and then we'd have all of our Jewish holidays, and we were allowed to enjoy those holidays. And I remember that. But the other thing I remember very well about it is that I took to it very well. I was raised in an Orthodox family, and I had never tasted pork until just one time prior to the time I went into the Navy, because it was, you just did not eat pork. Anyway, I ate everything. Whatever was handed, I loved it all. I loved the Navy. And there were a number of kids that were discharged because they came from ultra-religious groups. And the kids, these young men could not take the difference in diet, and they would give medical discharges. There was no faulting them. They just couldn't handle the food. It was psychological. The food was fine. I liked it. So that's one part of it that I remember. And then I became ill for 2 weeks. I think I got the chicken pox, and I was in the infirmary for 2 weeks. And when I got out, they let me stay with my company because this friend that I enlisted with was with me, and he brought me up to date on all the things that I missed, which wasn't really a lot. But I did graduate in that same company, and that was that. Any other questions?
Where did you go after Samson?
Well, very hard to remember. I did go to Yeoman's training school, and for some reason I got into trouble. Now, I don't know why I got into trouble, but we were sent to Great Lakes. It was another. Many of us were sent to Great Lakes after we finished Yeoman training school. I didn't do too well in Yeoman school because I was a stupid kid and I didn't want to study, or I was more interested in getting out and having fun. But anyway, when I could get out, that is. This was after Samson. I got out as a second-class seaman, which was really not very much. Not a promotion at all. And when we went to Great Lakes, then I got into trouble. I stayed AOL one night, and they picked the Shore Patrol picked me up, and I was tossed in the brig. Well, then a mistake happened. I was warned that I was going to go up to captain's mast, and then I got ill again, and I was told that I could stay in my bed. Well, I was supposed to go to captain's mast, and I didn't show up. Well, and I didn't know any of this. I think I had a touch of fever or something, because I had gone to a sick bay. And nobody said anything to me about the fact that I had to be in captain's mast, and I was very stupid. So I didn't show up. Finally, about 3 or 4 MPs show up at my bunk and pick me up and say, "You're in trouble." I remember that. Well, when I got before captain's mast, I was feeling better. And he was furious because I hadn't shown up. And he threatened that he would send me to the furthest point in the globe, I remember that, for punishment. Well, they put me on 7 days bread and water in addition to that, prior to that. Those days they did that. And then when I got sick again, right in the middle of the bread and water session. I was sent to the infirmary. I stayed there for about 3 or 4 days. I got well, and they put me back in the brig to complete my 7 days. I don't know if you ever knew that, Elda. Yeah, she's hearing things that I never told her. It doesn't matter. It's not important now. She's not going to get rid of me at this stage. Anyway, after completing my final 7 days, I was released, and I was sent to it was a communications school in Noroton Heights, Connecticut. And the thing about that impressed me, it was very interesting. Communications was simple, there was nothing to it. At this point I was kind of settled down. I wasn't wild anymore. I had a lot of fun. I met some very nice girls in Connecticut from very wealthy families. And this one girl took me for a ride in her father's car and asked me if I wanted to drive it. I said, sure. I didn't know how to drive, but I drove the car, and she says, maybe you better let me take over. And I did. I let her take over. Not that incident I remember. But the training at Noroton Heights, Connecticut, I don't know if that place is still there. It was an old Civil War veterans home. And there was still 3 Civil War veterans there alive, in sort of a hut in the back, back of the main buildings. And we'd see them. And to this day I regret not going over and talking to them, because they were history. And I was too young and stupid to realize that this was really important to do. I would have given anything to been wise enough to go and talk to them, but I missed that opportunity. Then I got into, I did get into a couple of squabbles, yes. I got into one fight, physical fight, with a guy in my company at that school, because he called me a dirty Jew and he blamed the Jews for starting the war. Well, that's all it took. And I was not quite 18. And we got into a fist fight. And we had a pretty good fight. Guys pulled us apart. And the next day, we were at attention downstairs for calisthenics or whatever, and we were all lined up. And we had an ensign that walked by, checking us over, and I had a big black eye, and the other guy was there. I know where he was. And I don't remember the name of the ensign, but I know he was Jewish, because he comes up to me, he looks at me with sort of a little smile on his face. He says, Tropper, I heard you got into a little fight last night. I said, yes, sir. He said, how'd you do? I said, I did all right. He smiled at me and he said, good. He kept walking. And I said, thank God he's a member of the tribe, because I would have really been in trouble. I know, his name wasn't Cohen or something, but I knew he was Jewish. But I got away with that. And then we did some, there was some other training, and I forget where it was, but we were going over what they called it was physical training, where you had to go over a lot of run over and jump, do a lot of jumping and running.
An obstacle course?
Obstacle course, exactly. Yeah, good word. That's what it was an obstacle course. And I don't even know where it was, but it was very clearly prior to my accident. Well, I jumped off this building, little platform that I had to jump, and a guy came right behind me and hit me in my femur, and I had a fractured femur. Well, they had to take me to the hospital, and that was a very tough experience for a kid, but they had me in traction. That's what they did in those days. They put in traction, was they had to go through my ankle, my thigh, and I was in traction for about 3 months or so. Maybe 3 months. But anyway, they finally put it in cast and took the traction off, and that's where the trouble was. The doctor put the cast on improperly, and it started to do a lot of damage to the muscle just under my knee, severe damage. And I kept complaining about it, and they never did anything about it until finally they cut a big hole in it, and they saw that I had some severe injury there because of the fact that it was put on improperly. My leg was okay. The fracture healed perfectly. As a matter of fact, the doctor in charge of the ward, I think he was a commander, there was a big inspection. There was a captain in the hospital, and he paraded me up and back to show how well I had done. But that injury was there, and they couldn't discharge me. So with that injury, I was probably hospitalized for maybe about 6 months because they wanted that injury to heal. And it still affects me today, the way I walk. And they've given me a 10% disability because of it. I'm not proud of it because I didn't earn it. I didn't see any action, but it happened. Anyway, we were finally sent as a part of the 7th Fleet. At this point, it was either early 45 or late 44, and the reason I say that is I'm not sure Germany had surrendered at that time. I think they may have. But we were sent over to Pearl Harbor, to the islands, and we were part of the 7th Fleet that was to invade the Japanese islands.
Now, what kind of ship were you assigned?
I wasn't assigned
Oh,
to
you
a
weren't,
ship. I
okay.
was on a transport ship sent over, and I
Okay.
was dumped and we were all waiting in Pearl Harbor
Okay.
to be part of some sort of an assault group. And it was a massive fleet, I know that, and they were really preparing to invade the islands. We all knew it.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese had not given up; they had not surrendered, and before I was ever sent anywhere else, the Japanese surrendered. And as an aside, I will say that was about the most difficult decision a president ever made. Truman saved at least 100,000 lives, because had we invaded the islands, the Japanese were fast fighters, and they would have fought and would have killed a lot of us.
Mhm.
So not one American died because of Truman dropping the bomb. Anyway, to continue on and end the part of my life in the Navy, I wound up in China. What were they going to do with all these guys? I wound up on Port 1 in Tsingtao, China, and I was stationed on an APL, APL 29, and I checked it up I think I checked it on the internet many years ago, and I think, well, years ago, how many years ago was the internet? They commissioned 25 or 30 of them.
Now,
I was
what was an APL?
It was, I don't know what it was, but it was a ship, I think it was what do they call these where they would send men back to rest in the Cooper?
R&R?
It was an R&R type ship,
Mhm.
because the naval complement wasn't that big, but they had a big mess hall, they had a big recreation area, they had an enormous laundry, and they were sent out to the island to take some guys in and get some R&R. Because when I was stationed on it in China, we ate like kings. I mean, there was steak every night, if you wanted it, ice cream, and everything you wanted, we had. It was ridiculous, but that was it. And,
Did you ever get to go ashore in China?
yes, and I'll tell you a little bit
Okay.
about that. But at this point, my attitude changed. I settled down a lot, and I think my settling down had to do with the skipper of the ship. His name was Lackman. He was the only one I remember. He was a full lieutenant, and he was the captain of the ship at that time. And he took me under his wing. I was a good typist, and I did a lot of work. And I was the skipper's yeoman. And I went through all the inspections with him and everything, and right behind him making notes and all that. And I did all the work in the office. And there was another. By the way, he had promoted me up to 3rd class at that point, from 2nd to 1st to 3rd class yeoman. And I was a 3rd class yeoman at that point. He promoted me as fast as he could because he liked me, and I was very willing to work, and I did a lot of work. I worked late. kids got into trouble, young men got into trouble. There'd be even some report marshals on board our ship because kids were saying AOL and that kind of stuff. And I was typing some report marshals, but I couldn't do a general because we had to ship them back to the States. So I would work at those. At that time, typewriters were only, you know, the old typewriters that we had. If you made a mistake, you had to take the page out and do it over. You couldn't correct it. So I would work late into the night to get my work perfect. And he recognized that. He even sent me in to have dinner at the officers' mess, which is something that never happens. He just told me to go in there and eat, so I did. Anyway, that's another little incident, aside that I had. Well, I had another accident. We went out horseback riding in Tsingtao. And I don't ride a horse, but I got on a horse and I fell off. And my foot got caught in the stirrup and the horse dragged me and they stopped the horse. So I wound up in a Marine Field Hospital. Right there. It was, with tents and everything. And nothing was broken, but I was badly, my muscles were bruised and everything. I had a lot of skin was worn. And so on.
Scrapes and
Scrapes
contusions.
and bruises and all. And I was in the hospital for about a week, maybe 10 days, and the skipper, Captain Latin, I called him Captain, would make sure that everybody came to visit me every day. He sent somebody over to visit me to make sure that I was okay. And then I came back to duty. And at this point, we were shipping the Japanese prisoners back to Japan. And all the guys that were eligible to go home on the point system, and I was way back there because I had come in April. I joined in April. I joined April 4th, 1944. I was discharged June 6th, 1946. Easy numbers to remember. At this point, I was in the skipper's office working again, and the guys wanted to go home. And every time a ship would go out with Japanese prisoners, there'd be a terrible uproar. Why the hell are they going home? We should be going home. Why are we sending them home? Well, we had to make room to get us on board the ships. Ultimately, they got the rest of the Japanese back, or at least that group that was around Tsingtao. And we started to send our boys home on the point system. Well, talk about power. I was the one to decide, as their what do you call they would each have a history. What would you call that?
Their
Personnel folder.
Personnel folder. All their personnel folders would come to my office, to this captain's office, and I kept them in order of their points, you see. And I had to decide. I effectively was making the decision. They were leaving it up to me, and by this time my skipper had gone home. I had a new ensign that was the skipper of the ship. I didn't like him very much. And, but I had to choose them as their numbers came up, and there were guys coming in pleading with me to put them in line ahead of me, and I couldn't do that because I'd get into trouble. They were offering me all kinds of bribes, you know.
Sure.
We'll give you 10 packs of cigarettes, stuff like that, whatever you want. And I didn't do it because I did not get into trouble. I realized that there's so many guys coming through my office that got into trouble for this, that, and the other, that I kept my nose clean. And the last thing I remember, it was my time to go home. And I was put on board a ship. I don't know what kind it was. It was a transport of some kind. And I was in the office typing. And the skipper came in, the captain, whoever you want to call him, might have been called, he wasn't a captain, but he was a skipper. And he looked at me and he said, if you'll sign up again, I'll give you second grade. They were talking about the need for a number of ships to go to the Anahuac Atoll test, atom bomb testing. If you remember any of that, they cleared that island completely of native personnel, and they conducted an above-ground atomic test. We didn't know what the fallout would be and where it would carry at that time. And I turned it down. I wanted to go home. I was still a kid. I was just 19. And but I was good at what I did. And at this point, my record was good. And I thanked him very much. And I said, no, sir, I would like very much to go home. And we were on our way back to the States, but somehow or other they figured they could get me to sign up and whatever. But I would have been assigned to that Anawitaka toll test somehow, because that's what they needed me for, or they needed people like me for. And by that time I got home, got back in the States, and I was discharged in Maryland because I was home. Stopped off in California, looked around in California, got off the train and looked around and I said, what an interesting place. Never knew that I'd be there for 40 years of my life. And went home, I was discharged, and that was the end of my career in the service.
Did you ever use the 5220 club?
Oh yeah, I did. I used it, and not only did I use that, but after I was married, my wife went to work. We moved to Brooklyn, New York, and my wife went to work as a nurse, and I went to NYU.
So under the GI Bill?
Oh yes, under the GI Bill. Okay. Thank God for the GI Bill. And when we went out to California, I completed my education in California. And then my wife and I decided that we were going to spend a goodly number of our years getting our education. And my wife got her bachelor's degree, and she got 2 master's degrees, and went further. I used it. I was happy to have been able to use it.
Did you join any veterans organizations at all?
No, I never did.
How about staying in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Never. Sorry about that, I never did. Just this one friend of mine, and I haven't been in touch with him for about 20 years. The one I joined up with. But I haven't been in touch with him for about 20 years.
Okay, that was another question was going to be about him.
Yeah.
Did you ever see any USO shows at all?
During the time I was in service?
Service, yes.
Yes, I did, and I wasn't. Oh yeah, in Chicago. I'll never forget this. Well, I was a good-looking kid when I was in the Navy, and I met this girl. She was beautiful, and I danced with her, and we talked a little bit. Then this guy comes over to me. He was another sailor. He had to be a second or first class, and he told me to stay away from her, that she belonged to him. He scared the heck out of me. And I stayed away from her. But that was that. That's what I remember about Great Lakes and Chicago. Oh, the other thing about Chicago that I remember very well, I'm bouncing around a little bit.
That's okay.
The people in Chicago were very good to us. They were very kind to us. We never paid for anything. Most of the restaurants I ever went in, I never paid. They wouldn't let us. Transportation was free, as I recall. And I think Chicago was a great city for servicemen at the time. That's the only comment I can make about it. Knowing Chicago, I've never been back.
Now, being Jewish, were you ever aware, even though you were in the Pacific, of the concentration camps?
Oh yes, yes, very much so. Because before I went into the service, my mother had a sister in England. Somehow or other she got to England, and she did everything in her power to get her sister over here, because all of her other relatives were killed in the Holocaust. Her mother and all of her other family, and I know nothing about them. But her sister was in England, and the only way she could get here was if my father, we were poor, my father was a working man, painter, house painter, and the only way we could get them over here if they could be sponsored by another member of the family. And we had some fairly well-off relatives in Boston. So he went down to Boston, or up to Boston, and somehow got them to sign for her. And so my aunt, my mother's sister, came to Brooklyn to live with us at that time. When this was, I had to be about 13 or 14. Well, this was during when we knew what was going on in Europe with the Jews. Well, the Jews always knew first, I think. They felt that there were many people all over the United States never heard of the Holocaust at that time. But we knew what was happening because people were telling us it was getting back. And my aunt came with her son, and he spoke with a little English accent and had shorts on, and we made fun of him. We were all kids. And she finally moved out and took a place for herself, an apartment, and worked in the garment industry and put him through college. And he's a professor in one of the colleges in upstate New York here. I've lost track of him, which is not too good. But I did get to meet him once in the 50s when I came up here to work for a while. I was living with my wife's. When we decided that Elda was to go to Cleveland to get her bachelor's degree, I came up here and lived with her parents. We lived with her parents. And I helped my brother for a while. My older brother. He had a contract in Boston, and we all worked with him for 2 or 3 weeks. And somehow or other they found my cousin. And at this point he was he was a teacher, a professor at some school in upstate New York, and then I lost track of him again because I went with my wife to Cleveland for her education.
Okay. How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
A great deal in this regard. As a mature adult now, I'll be 80 in December, I realized 2 things. I have a great deal of respect for the service and everything the guys in the service do. Don't ask me about the politics of why we've been in what war, because you really don't want to hear my opinion on that. But the guys that were in, all of them were great. Tom Brokaw says ours was the greatest generation. Not true. All of them were a great generation. Vietnam, the boys that served there, the boys that are serving now, they're all great guys, every one of them, because they believe in what they're doing. And I would have stayed in the Navy. I loved the Navy. I really would have signed up again, even when I got back to the States. And I'll tell you what influenced me not to do it. I was considering it. This was before I ever met my wife. This was just when I got returned. I met a first-class yeoman who happened to be Jewish. And I said, you know, I'm thinking about signing up again. And he said, don't do it. I said, why not? He said, well, I've been passed over 3 or 4 times, and I know my grades were the top, but they didn't promote me because I'm a Jew, and you'll run into the same thing. And I realized that the United States was not ready, even in the services at that time, to overcome that arrogance and that stupid discrimination. It happened later. I don't know how much later, 10 years, 15 years later, that the blacks were able to get out of the kitchen.
1950s, yeah.
It was in the 50s, right? But not in 46. It didn't happen in 46. And he really was instrumental in me not signing up again. I was on the verge of going back in because I did like the Navy. I liked the discipline. I liked the idea of knowing where I was going, what was going to happen. And I was good. I got along with all the guys. I never ran into any discrimination, really, except for that one stupid incident in Connecticut. other than that, I made a lot of friends that I never really kept in touch with, which I should have. So, my opinion, did you ask me what, how did it influence me?
Yes.
I think it made me a responsible person. The discipline, I think, was very good for me, because I could have been a very wild kid. I grew up with a bunch of wild kids. Before I went into the service, and living in Brooklyn especially, I was involved with a gang, and the things we did were nothing compared to what gangs do today, but it wasn't good. So, but I got out of it, and I know some of the guys that got into serious trouble as adults. I would hear stories about it. My friend in Brooklyn that I joined up with told me about it. So,
Do you think you would have gone on to college if it hadn't been for the GI Bill?
I never would have done. Well, I think I was still too young to appreciate. I did not use the GI Bill until 1950, I think. Wasn't it, when we went to NYU?
Something like that.
Yeah. I think I appreciated it more after I got married. I was still, I was at different jobs, doing different things. I really didn't like the construction.
Now, when did you get your GEDs? After you came back?
Right after I came back, I felt that I was smart enough. When I took one test in the Navy, I remember they were doing qualifying tests to find out what your IQ was or something. And I remember that the individual that did my test and took my score says, "Why are you here? Why aren't you in officer's training?" And I looked at him and I said to myself, is he talking to me? I couldn't believe that, because apparently I had gotten grades that were high enough. I hadn't really advanced that far. But it makes me feel good to know that I had what it took. As a matter of fact, when I graduated high school, when I graduated college in California, and Elder helped me there, I got a letter from the Marine Corps, offering me officers training. They were looking for officers. And I said, now how can I do that? Where's Elder gonna go? So I just ignored it. But it was nice to know that I got the letter. I wish I'd have kept it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for
Are we
your-
through?
Yes, sir.
Boy, that was easy. Did I take too much time?
Not at all.
No.
It was a great interview.
Was it an interesting story?
Yes, sir.
Yes.